I'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Talent Insights. Talent Insights are Australia's leading specialist data recruitment business. With offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, they're experts at providing recruitment strategy and building data teams for clients across industries Australia-wide. They provide recruitment solutions for all roles across the data lifecycle, including data engineering, data science, advanced analytics, customer and marketing insights, business intelligence, data product managers, and data governance. They're skilled at finding the best permanent and contract hires for your business needs, as well as statement of work, project focus, data resources. At Talent Insights, relationships matter most. I can say from first-hand experience, Talent Insights are fantastic to work with. Whether you're a business leader within an HR network or a specialist data candidate, Talent Insights should be the first company you turn to for all your data recruitment needs. Find them at talentinsights.com.au.
Hi, this is Felipe Flores. Welcome to Data Futurology. Today, we're going to be covering data ethics, AI ethics, a topic that is so important. We're going to be covering privacy. How do we ensure that the data that we collect is relevant for our downstream analysis? How do we treat it if it's not? Everything under data ethics and privacy sun. For that, I couldn't think of anyone better. We have Jade Har with us. She is the head of privacy and data ethics at National Australia Bank. Jade, thank you so much for joining us. How are you going today?
I'm very well today. Thank you. How are you going?
Very good and very excited for this conversation. I thought to kick us off, could you tell us a bit about your background, your origin story, how you got into this space, and then we can take it from there.
I'd love to. I love hearing the word origin story because it makes you really think of like X-Men, like I'm the Wolverine or something. So it's probably not as exciting as that, but I'll give it a crack. So I'm a Māori and Pākehā woman, Ngāti Maniapoto, born in New Zealand. And being from New Zealand is really part of my identity, very much so. And when I was thinking about this, the origin, I went way back thinking about my childhood, because I always had a sense of public good. I always really wanted to do the right thing. I had a real strong sense of public social justice, caring about people. I really wanted to be a lawyer and I really wanted to work for government, and that probably sounds a bit like tragic for like a young kid, but that's what I really wanted to do when I was young. And I did start my New Zealand career in government and working in Indigenous land rights. So I first started with law reform, so working on how law changes and how it can protect. But the last role I had in New Zealand before I moved overseas was a bit of a highlight, I guess. For me, I was appointed as the registrar for the Waitangi Tribunal, and that's a permanent commission of inquiry in New Zealand. It hears claims by Māori, iwi, or tribes about against the Crown, I guess, alleging breaches against the Treaty of Waitangi, which is our treaty between iwi and Crown dating back to 1840. So I've always had this interest about doing right or trying to do right. And so I like working in places that are in ways that make me feel like I contribute, I'm giving something. So when I moved overseas, I sort of did continue that theme, doing more legal work, but this time in protection of vulnerable adults, children, working in equality, anti-discrimination, and data protection. And it was really when I started working in data protection that I started to think, wow, there's a lot more to human rights, I guess, than, as a lawyer you can really spread yourself into. It's not just about working in a particular area. There are so many different areas, and working for corporations, hadn't really appreciated how I could do that and still really think about how I stay true to myself about sort of more public interest and values. Privacy really became my place to hang my human rights flag. And I've been doing that for some time now, and predominantly working just in privacy since I've been living in Australia. So I really dug my heels in there, and data ethics just came as a natural sort of development for me in that field. I moved from doing more legal work to sort of helping the business understand about how we can apply ethics to the use of data and make sure we're being responsible, not just thinking about legal compliance. So for me, very lucky to be able to be part of setting up the data ethics framework at NAB. Had amazing support from senior leaders here. And at NAB, we really talk about doing the right thing. So that's how you treat people and treat your customers, but that's also how you should be thinking about their data. So for me, it has always been about people. He tangata, he tangata, that's my angle. That drives me, people and relationships. And anyone that will know me will definitely know I'm a people person. And I just think I'm lucky enough, I guess, to work in a company which, focuses on having relationships. So that's sort of how I ended up in data ethics, and I am learning every day and continue to learn every day in this space.
The best. I love the themes. I love the journey, and it's so great to see that an organization like NAB is having a whole of business approach to data ethics. That in other organizations years ago, it was seen as kind of like the data scientist job or side gig almost. It definitely needs everyone to come together. So I love that's happening at the bank. And before we jump more into data ethics, I did want to ask you about the Data and AI Month. So I've heard really good things. Can you tell us a little bit about that initiative?
Sure thing. Very happy to. So this is the month of August. So it's we've been doing this throughout the whole month. It's a program of events that's really been designed to sort of engage everyone across the organization. So it's not just talking to people who are in one division. It's really opening it all up to get those connections happening, and also just to share the stories, I guess, of what's going on. We really want to help people who work for us understand that that's what we want to be. We want to be a data-driven organization, but we also recognize that you have to bring everyone along that data journey, for lack of a better frame, together. So it's about uplifting and enhancing everyone's data literacy. There have been, I believe this month, we've been able to run 70 events and had over 12,000 attendees at events. So that's a huge amount. Yeah, last year was the first year we kicked this off, and we had 50 events, which was, I won't tell you something for nothing. It was a big month. It was very big. So somehow we managed to even squeeze in more. And we had 7,000 attendees last year. So we've really kicked it out of the park for this year. So we've had success stories, people saying about what they're doing in the bank. We've had our CEO, Ross McEwen, attending. We've had our partners been coming in. So we've had people from the AFL and AWS and Microsoft. We've had some of our business customers come in and talk about how they use technology and how it works for them. So it's been a really nice opportunity to get people together, but also to learn. And I think it can be difficult finding time in your day-to-day work life to have that sort of opportunity to do learning. And so they recorded all the events. And so if you haven't actually been able to see something live, because some are hybrid events in person, some are Zoom, we can go back and sort of take it all in. Or I've even had people in my team talk about how they've gone back and re-listened to something. And I was like, that's such nice feedback. That's great. It's really great. So it's a really big deal. And everyone's probably going to be quite exhausted for next week once everything's over.
For sure. What a huge month. And the preparation leading up to it would have been massive as well. Well done.
I'll share that. Thanks. I will share that.
Yeah, definitely. That is amazing. And it continues with the theme that we were talking about before, about making everyone in the organization more aware about data and AI, bringing them into the fold, and seeing it really as a team sport. That it's not only about.
It's not just. Exactly. It's not just about the data scientists in a room anymore. You have to absolutely get people who are applying the technology, as well as the people who even if they're not doing it in their day-to-day role, it all impacts us as a society. And, hearing someone explain it in the office, which you might know them, maybe a softer way or a gentler way of learning about a new skill without having to feel like you've got to go find it out for yourself. So it's been a big success.
Yes. I love it. So good. So then let's start jumping into the data ethics components. One of the first ones that I wanted to get your thoughts is around misappropriation and get your views when data is collected for one purpose, often related to payments across all industries. And then we want to start using it for customer analysis, predictive models. And we have kind of like that proxy that might have some of the signal that we're looking for, but not an awesome fit. What do you think about this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think, having a privacy lens on this, it's really important if we're going to do anything with personal information that it's very transparent. We don't want people, there might be so many new things that are coming up to do. You have to always be remembering what have we told people and shared with them that we want to do with their data. And I do think, making sure that it's very clear and, transparent and that people understand what's happening. That's a there are legal obligations to do that, but also it's just trying to ensure that you're thinking about not just the latest new tool, but actually how you help people understand why you might be doing some of this work. So, creating models and using algorithms isn't necessarily something like brand new. Banks have been using models for years and years and years to help be better at understanding, credit decisioning and being able to assist with that process. So banks are often, sort of old hat really when it comes to creating a lot of models, but how does everyone understand it, and where's the human interaction point is probably some of the things that we're trying to make sure that we're always being very mindful of where the handover is from, sort of behind or back end sort of manipulation versus are we starting to do something with a customer direct, and how do we make sure that they understand which is where's a real person or where's a machine helping them. But I find the whole conversation about misappropriation with data at the minute so interesting, because we've obviously got a lot of tools out there now that are, have really absorbed all this information from the internet and, websites, articles, Reddit, all the good places, and they're sort of like creating and monetizing and making new stuff from that. And it's really hard to sort of understand what are going to be the impacts on some of this, because they haven't necessarily, come out and said, this is where we've got all our data from.
Yeah. And
that's the age-old question, I think. Anytime someone wants to talk about ethics, I think it's always remembering, like, where did this stuff come from? Or what was the data that trained this model that we're thinking about, and always really coming back to, like, the data, how appropriate it is to be using it in the first place. And I think obviously when you're creating it internally and you've collected the data directly from customers, that's a very different position than when people are scraping off information from so-called public sources, when people may have no idea who those parties are that are doing the scraping, and then not then know what's happening and how their data could be being used. But I think it's just a really interesting area with the creative side too of misappropriation, because you've got, the lawyer in me wants to worry about all people with their copyrights, out there. There's a lot of litigation at the minute, I think, happening in the US about people being worried about, losing their creative voice because their pictures have been used and you train these models, and how can they prove that? But I think also with technology, we're going to figure out how do we fix those problems. So having watermarks, or thinking about other sorts of ways that we can use AI to actually prevent AI from taking your images to do some of the stuff. So it's definitely going to be a watch this space generally. But I think for us, it's very much about coming back to basics, about where did that data come from, and making sure we're always really confident in our own sourcing and collection practices.
I love it. So definitely informed consent as number one. And then I also really like your views of that when we develop new technology, it will always be a double-edged sword. Since the beginning of time, it's been like that. But having the optimism to say that, technology will continue to help us improve the technology that we've created and the issues that or unintended consequences that come with those development of technologies. So I think that's a really, really nice lens to it. Really good. And for a lot of people that maybe don't spend too much time on the ethics side, maybe yet, or for them, how would you provide them a kind of like a singular view of ethics, something that we can use as a guiding light or as a bit of a beacon, something that we can start to move towards? Obviously a big question, but any thoughts on how people can start to think about or develop a kind of like a singular view of ethics?
Yes, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think ethics principles or AI ethics principles have been a lot produced. We have our own. Everyone has their own set, but there often isn't like necessarily a one-stop shop where you can absolutely pick it up. But there are so many complementary themes in the ones that are out there. So definitely thinking about fairness. Absolutely has to be part of it. And I think fairness, again, I've got my privacy professional lens on, but it's something which we have to think about deeply, because it's not just about how you collect that information being fair, but is the ongoing use and any sort of work that you may do with that data, is it fair? It's being transparent. We've talked about that already. Making sure that people understand when technology is, interrupting your normal day-to-day interactions. Making it really clear that this is assisted or automation. And I think part of that really is going to be having a pause when you're thinking about your work and thinking about creating or a problem that you're trying to solve and trying to fix it with technology, is really having that confidence to go, right, we don't just have to pick any old tool. Let's just have a think about how this impacts us. Like, what are the benefits? Like, is it actually worth doing it this way? Could there be a simpler way? I mean, at the minute, I think everyone is very excited. Obviously, there's been a huge leap, like a really big leap at the minute with AI, generative AI especially. So there's obviously a great excitement to sort of understanding how that can be used. But I also think we've got to also understand what are our problems to solve. So knowing that we've got, having the strength to say we pause when we really consider benefits, harms, impacts, unintended consequences. So one of the other things, fairness, transparency, but also doing the work, doing that impact assessment sort of piece of it. And there are a lot of frameworks out there that people can look to. Like, when you think about your own morals or values, they are very different from person to person and jurisdiction to jurisdiction, maybe all your experiences, beliefs, religion. But if you could, there's definitely consistency and common themes in some of the ethical frameworks available. So the EU AI Act, which is still very much in flux, but that whole goal of that act is to create some global standards, some consistency. And at the minute, they can't quite agree on all the consistency. But there's going to be different things in there that people can learn from. And I think there's the takeaway again is that whole making sure you've got consistency and your standardization. The NIST, so the National Institute for of Standards and Technology, the US framework, they've got an AI risk management framework as well. And that's been looked in and explored to help lots of different countries, not just the US, to develop policies on there. And one of the things I really like, one of their takeaways or focus is that they're trying to not just think about, I guess, is it accurate? Is it safe? Does it work? It's also that socio-technical lens. And in our data ethics team at the bank, that's definitely the lens that we bring, that social dimension lens, to really think about how does this actually impact our customers? Does it have an impact on community? If we're using data, or could we use data in a way that could help community? I think that societal impact, especially as things get bigger, is going to be a really interesting space to sort of see and hear where the voices are coming from on that.
Yes. Oh, that is so interesting. Yes, to think about the impact and the beyond the immediate application.
Yeah.
Yeah, the application creates a change in the world, and does that change have the impact that is aligned with what the impact that we want to have?
And exactly. And I think sometimes it's hard, right? This is all new stuff. And a lot of the unintended consequences are because we cannot stand them. And I think there's going to be a lot of experimentation, a lot of exploration. But if we can, wouldn't it be nice if we all just had, a common set of goals across the world, which we don't really have in any area, but we do think about safety, obviously being pretty consistent, aviation safety, maritime safety, road safety, that's something, I think the safety element sometimes of what we're doing here with technology is something which people perhaps can have a common grounding on. We want things to be used so that people are better enabled, and it enriches our customers' experience. It also, not just companies like banks, but also I think governments also is thinking about how it helps citizens. And so, I think that long-term, longitudinal impact approach, that's really where we need to start thinking about not just the output, but on outcomes. I think is probably the right word at the moment.
Yes. Okay. I love that answer. It's got so much to it. So maybe let's dive into one of the aspects. I really like your comments around fairness and transparency. When we think about the subsequent analysis that we can do with data, when we think about also data collection, how do we ensure that we have safeguard against biases and ensure fairness in the data collection and then the analysis that come downstream?
Yeah, and you can, as you can imagine, being working in a bank, we have access to a lot of data, and I think the first thing you just have to be very aware of is that just because we have a lot of data doesn't mean it's perfect. So we will absolutely, when you're thinking about what your data is, you have to just know that there is going to be bias in there, and that has to be your starting point. And anyone who doesn't think that's their starting point is probably fooling themselves. But it's also about trying to think about that from end to end. So, thinking about collections right at the beginning, making it sure that it's that people understand, but also if you're collecting it directly, that you're meeting all your legal requirements, of course, but I mean that you're also just trying to think about what would people expect. So is this collection something which you really need? Are you always applying data minimization when you're doing things like this? And also being aware that, what community attitudes are. We've heard a lot about community attitudes. I think everyone's very nervous at the minute with personal information, having so many very large data breaches in Australia over the last 12 months. It's not been a great time for people. Anyone who's got an identification document has probably been impacted at some point. And, it's terrible. It's really heartbreaking, especially people who are impacted more than once. So we really have to start thinking about when we need to collect things. And while some entities will have legal obligations to do things like that, others won't. And we've really got to start being more open to the idea of what data we really need to do our work, and what's other things that perhaps are really nice to have and maybe aren't that nice to have anymore because of data breaches. So making sure that, fairness and reasonableness are very key concepts under the Privacy Act. and it's objective of the Privacy Act too. So the reforms that are coming, I think they're going to put a lot more emphasis on that that fairness element and making sure that when you're doing activities with data or personal information, that it's not just that the collection was fair or wasn't unfair. It's that all your activities are seen as reasonable and they're not going to result in harms. And that to me has a very nice connection to ethics. Because we should be thinking about how to prevent unjustified harms. We want to protect people from bad stuff, basically. And I think in terms of the sort of subsequent analysis piece, understanding that when you're going through and training models and using that data, that you've got a really representative bunch of people doing that work, and that you're looking around the room and seeing people that look like your customers. And if you don't, how are you going to address that? We want to work with people that all have a diverse view, so that that'll help us do better at reviewing our data. And I guess the thing is too, when you're reviewing, it's not just the data scientist reviewing the data science. You really need other lenses, not always technical, which is why I'm definitely not a technical expert, and I love working in data ethics because I get to sort of flex my other skills and help people think about bias and other issues a little bit differently.
So true. And that's key. Like it's critical to have multiple perspectives, multiple voices in there, and for us to actively and openly talk about, the metrics that we're trying to optimize for in our predictive models. And so, for example, like in the last few years, I've been working in healthcare, and there's organizations in the US that have gotten in trouble because their predictive models were optimizing to target people where they can reduce the cost of healthcare the most. And then the bias that introduced is that the people that was being targeted were the ones that were able to spend the most in healthcare. And then that meant that they were getting better support to minimize that cost and sort of maximize the gains there. And there was a trick missed that it's easier to see in hindsight, that they could have optimized for clinical outcomes or clinical improvement or health benefits, and they would have had a much better or much fairer targeting of the support that they were able to provide. And so having those conversations, having those questions really even around what is the metric that we're optimizing for is really important. And I think that actually links to the next question that I wanted to ask you, based on your answer before around the evaluation of broader societal impact of the data-driven technologies. How do you guys think about that? Kind of like the cascading impacts of having these decisions. How do you think about it? How do you work through those downstream impacts and bringing them to life into the applications that are being built?
Yeah, well, I love this question because this is where my people element kicks in. And I think that's the thing. I think when we're thinking about technology, sometimes we're so focused on what the tool is that we can sort of skip and forget that we're applying the tool to people. And whether we're talking about, citizens of a country or a state, or we're talking about customers in our instance, that's who we're talking about. This is where the rubber hits the road. It's how does it help, and how does it impact, and how does it benefit our people? And I think if you have, again, like my origin story, like the reason I care about people was because, there are inherent rights that we really want protected as living in society, our human rights. And if you have a human right focused, I think, on understanding your technology and assessing and reviewing technology, it puts you on a really different path than if you're just thinking about, does it work? Do I get the output I needed? What we should be asking is about how does this enhance an experience for our customers? Does this actually help a pain point or remove a pain point for my staff, our employees? And I think if you're actively thinking about that impact in that way, you actually get very different responses. And it may not mean that you've created something that you can't use. It may be that your eyes are wide open as to what the impacts are. If you know what the risks are and the harms and the benefits, then you've got your eyes open, you can figure out how to mitigate, or you might be pleasantly surprised that there's a really nice outcome. Therefore, you should celebrate that. Not everything, we talked about technology not being neutral, but it doesn't mean everything that we create that's an advancement is bad either. We want to celebrate when we get those like wins and how we can help our customers and we can help, relieve a pain point for staff and employees as well. So that's where I feel like impact assessments are just so crucial, because asking the right questions digs into that detail. I work in a bank. We're heavily regulated. We have a lot of assessments and reviews we have to do. I head up our privacy team, so we're all very familiar with privacy impact assessments. We've also been doing data ethics assessments for 4 years now, and operationalizing ethics into reviews. So not just saying, we've got some nice principles, but really crunching it and saying, how does it fit? Because some principles could be very aspirational, but unless you can see what all the impacts are and ask the right questions, you're never going to know how you balance things out. Because maybe speed is, a key driver for something, but maybe if you turn down speed, you've got a better outcome on something else. Also, lawyer and me love a worst case scenario. But when you're thinking about, someone's coming in to talk about this beautiful new technology, they're only ever thinking blue sky. And so together, blue sky and worst case scenario, you figure it out. But by having both ends though, you can see whether it actually delivers your blue sky. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't a blue sky this time. Maybe it's something more practical. But I think, having that as a really good starting point to know, get people in together, feel like the questions are contributing to start developing something better, rather than seeing impact assessments as like a block. There should be a way to give value. I feel great when we do a data ethics assessment and someone says that's made genuine change to what we were doing. Like, that makes me feel so good. And then there are other things that I think, we don't really need to be across this as much, because we won't be adding any value here. You got it. And that's super powerful too. It makes me also feel good, because I don't want data ethics to ever be a checkbox, because it's not really doing much then. That's what someone else can figure that stuff up. I'm not here about having a checkbox. It's really about to add value. And I think you see it when you can do that balance. That's why I'm very passionate about it, because I get to put the sort of all my things that I'm interested in. But one of the just a tiny bit to add on this point of thinking about societal impacts, I think we've often been really focused on the individual. So we're really worried about how does it impact that customer. And if we start thinking, I think, a little bit more about the societal harms and the harms to the group, I feel like that's where we're going to be really making some leaps. So we do have a focus on community in our data principles, often thinking about what we could do for that for a segment or the whole or Australia. But I think when you start thinking about longitudinal impacts and not just a once-off thing, that's so powerful. And I've been doing a little research in this space, absolutely plagiarizing wildly. There's amazing research or some papers being coming out of KU Leuven, from the university in Belgium, by a woman called Natalie Smuha. And she talks about having thinking more, if you're a policymaker, on that societal really impact, thinking about public review, thinking about monitoring, thinking about people having rights to say, hey, this doesn't impact me, but if there's a public impact, then there should be an ability to sort of talk about that. And I think that that's very much aligned to human rights and procedures. So I just think it's a natural progression. It just sort of fits together nicely. It's just a good framing, I think, to have.
Yes, that is really nice. That is really nice. I really like that, and I think it's so important, and it's difficult to do, but prioritizing it is key. And at least for me in my career, I learned to see the value of impact assessments, for example. I learned to see them embarrassingly late. And it's something that like I wish I had appreciated earlier on, and appreciated as the support and the how to bring better progress, instead of having kind of like that negative mindset from the start. And I was like, oh, this is just going to delay the work and it's going to be painful. Instead, it's going to tell us where the landmines are.
Yeah.
Right.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's about trying to get that different, cultural expectation, because I think a lot of times people don't want to do something because they think it's going to slow me down. I don't understand the value of it, and I know I have to do it, but and that's not really. I don't want to be in charge of running out lots of assessments just because people have to do it. Like, it feels so much more rewarding professionally, but also like to see actual change. And there are a lot of things that we hear about, and we're like, this is super complex. Don't have a ready-made cookie answer for you, but this is exciting. You're doing something really new. And so, I've been trying to, we are being very deliberate in some of our approaches to considering AI technologies at the minute. And that's one of the things. It's about trying to say, we're excited to try these things. We want to do it safely. We want to take the time and talk with our risk colleagues, and talk with the business, and talk with people who are frontline, so they can actually say, this would help a job, this would help the bankers, this would help our customers, rather than just sort of be like someone runs off and just creates the thing, the widget. Here it is, go put the widget out there. I think I think it will lead to better outcomes. Like, societal, that's a big lofty game, but I mean, like, internally it'll lead to better outcomes, and people feel more bought in. Like, it's 101 management. You want to bring everyone on really along the ride.
Yeah, definitely. But also, I think a lot of your answer has been touching on what I wanted to ask you next, which was around how do we build trust and confidence in AI. And I really I wanted to ask you, because I really like the human lens that you have throughout that, at an individual level and at a collective. So I'll ask you anyway. How can we build trust in AI?
In AI, yeah. Well, I think number one is being safe. So taking your time to understand what you're doing. You're not just like head down, let's go for it. You're being considered. And I think being safe and considered absolutely means that you're doing that discussion, you're having those impact, you're really teasing out benefits, harms, consequences, good stuff, bad stuff, whatever, everything. And I think it also comes back to having that trust is by being fair and using things that feel fair. So people are like, I expect that. It makes sense to me. And maybe even it starts to delight people. Wouldn't that be lovely? Like, I think if people, really got something out of it, they see the benefit, and then it does build confidence. I think in Australia, we've had the Australian public has probably had a bit of a mixed experience to date. If you look at various media headlines about perhaps some of the things that haven't worked so well, so-called AI, not necessarily everything's been AI, but there's been probably a lot of negative sort of reaction to some things that just haven't gone particularly well. And so I think being transparent about some of the use cases that are going well, showing the benefits, I think being very open and saying, if that didn't work, we decided not to go through to use something. Having conversations like that would be so powerful, because we're exploring and saying, we tried this, it wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be, but that being safe bit, I think, really means that when you're trialing it, you're doing it in contained environments. You're not just pushing it out to millions of people. And that's really the approach that we are taking here, is very much contained, experiments. The other thing I think to help build trust and confidence is education. It has to be everyone's responsibility. Government are obviously going to be thinking about how to help everyone understand more about some of the things that they'd be using, but even just generally, NAB's had obviously a big commitment to learning hours with Data and AI Month. I would definitely implore all sorts of, regardless of your size of organization or on your personal circumstances, get out there. There are some really common, phrases or terms, technical terms that once you grasp them, you grasp a lot. Most people have probably had a play with ChatGPT in their personal capacity and haven't really given two thoughts about what that all means. And maybe, in your personal capacity, you won't feel like you need to. But I guess it's also saying that you don't have to be a technical expert to sort of have to look at some of these things. But being aware of what you put in is very important. So the education piece on, if there are public things available, be mindful that this is public. So therefore, how you treat it, you should be thinking about it as public. I think there's a lot of really key terms and concepts that once you grasp them, then you start to learn more. Like I definitely wasn't reading about, neural networks a few years ago. And now I'm sort of like, oh, that's how that works in neural networks, But, saying that aloud might freak some people out. But, if you're talking about language models, people have been like, what's that? ChatGPT is using a language model. There's lots of things that I think may have been a bit scary, but now we can start to learn what they are. And then you can make your own decision about whether you want to play in that field or not. There are a lot of other consequences for obviously putting in the wrong type of data or your own sensitive data into open tools, which I won't go into. But I think education is very, very, very key.
Very, very key, because then people can make decisions with the understanding, with the awareness. And as you say, it's not a super high bar that, for example, understand.
To learn it. Felipe, everyone can learn it.
No, it's like there's some things that is like saying, understanding that when you're interacting with a large language model, you are sharing that information with the organization, and that information is going to be overseas. That therefore you should be looking at information
and have a think about it. I mean, and it might not change your behavior, but I think, I'm absolutely with you. What you said, like being aware lets you have more choice, and then you decide. And that's what I think. There's a real enablement element here with ethics. I think, it's not just about stopping; it's actually about saying, how do we enable you to do something safely and responsibly? And I think, by helping people understand some of these concepts or basic framing, like, oh, I'm actually giving them something. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Okay, then I won't put in my name. I might put in something else, but I'm not going to put in my name. Little things like that. I think that's just that should build awareness. I think will build confidence, essentially.
Correct. Because that awareness, when it developed in social media, it really changed people's perception. Like I remember this.
Oh my God.
Yeah, right. I remember in Facebook when people were checking in everywhere that they were, saying and showing it publicly, saying, "I'm here now. I'm here now. I'm here. This is the person who I'm with." Checking all my pictures and making everything public, and then people went, "Oh shit! Like now that's gonna be everywhere."
100%.
Then everyone's ran in.
I know, and like people used to go on there and like go, "Oh, my hobbies," and go like, "Just put in all this data, and fill out every single question," and then they ask you more questions, and people used to do that. No one turned their mind. Everyone just thought that was fun. And it is fun, but it's also like you have to be aware of the choice you're making, which is you are sharing a whole bunch of insight. And you get to decide to do that or not. You don't have to do it. And maybe it's not a great idea to put lots of detail about you, because sadly, and this is one of the big things about safety, is that although some of this technology is amazing, we're going to have to be really smart about how we protect ourselves from when the bad guys use these technologies as well. So being smart about what you share is, I think, is such an important lesson that everyone, every age needs to appreciate.
I love it. It's so true. And I think that is the excellent note to end on as well. Jade, I want to thank you so much for your time, for your perspectives, for sharing your experience and your knowledge. That is phenomenal, for putting privacy and ethics in a way that makes technical people want to engage, see it as a value add. I think it's critical. And as I said, like, I learned it way too late in my career, but the way that you describe it really makes it appealing and really highlights the value. So thank you so much for sharing all that with us today.
Pleasure. Oh, it's been really lovely to have a chat about this. Love talking about people, love talking about human rights and privacy and ethics. So it's lovely to be on Data Futurology. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope that you got a lot out of this discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel so more people can find out about the challenges that leaders have in the analytics and AI space. And that's what we're trying to share in Data Futurology. So please like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Thank you so much.